everybody. Welcome to This Week in Pre-IPO Stocks podcast. With me, I got Nick Fusco, CEO of 8View, a pre-IPO secondary market pricing company, and Evan Cohen, co-founder and chief operating officer of WithVincent.com, a media company focused on alternative investments. Okay, fellas, OpenAI, 150 billion. Huh? All right, so here it is. Like, do you come into a company that has a $150 billion nod, right? SpaceX is at 210. Like, it's venture capital investing. One could argue maybe companies at this size with this revenue, maybe that's not really venture. But, if you come in and you want 2, 3, 4X, I mean, this company it's going to be a big company, right? So, like, here's the question. Does OpenAI have potential to be like $1 trillion business, like up in the echelons of the Apples and the Microsofts and everything else, right? Like Evan, what do you think? Because could this company be kind of a 10X from here? Does it still have that potential, OpenAI?
Well, you know where I stand on my stance of OpenAI in general. I think it's a very impressive technology. I've always really been unsure how the business model operates. I will say I did play around with their latest model last week before the news of the new funding round was sort of like rumored popped out, and I was incredibly impressed. I'm like, this is a really big step function in the model and the ability for it to process. I was really impressed. So I was like, wait a second, maybe this is actually something much bigger than even I prospected. And then look, there are $1 trillion technology companies already in the world. So can this be one of them? Anything can happen. I certainly feel like it's not off the table. I do feel like the Apple partnership, now that they're rolling out the new iOS and the new iPhones with Apple Intelligence, that's going to be a great big thing for them. I do believe the new model is really impressive, and that could be a big step function for them. So look, I think there's an opportunity there for a 5Xer, 6Xer. I think closer to 5. I'd be much more confident if you told me it was a $500 billion valuation than a $1 trillion. But
trillion, yeah,
it's a lot. But
so it's
anything
not
can happen,
a no.
Especially with inflation. Inflation for sure.
Got
Why
it.
not?
I like that inflation zinger at the end. So Nick, what do you think, man? $1 trillion? Is there a probability? Or are you more like Evan, kind of 500 billion feels better?
No, I think it's fair. I like the ended on the inflation aspect. I'm not going to go down the inflation route, but I will say, I mean, a lot of these plays are somewhat deflationary, I believe, actually, but also they will get to that 1 trillion point. As long as they come out as the winning horse here, along with the other LLM plays. But also, right. I think what's going to happen is because of the interplay between Microsoft, Apple, and everybody else, they're just going to be that far ahead as well. So by the time OpenAI does arrive to that 1 trillion, if it's Anthropic or OpenAI or whomever it might be, you're going to have a lot of the other leaders maintain their healthy distance. So there will be a delta. Maybe that delta percentage-wise is going to shrink, but I think the bigger players are maintaining the advantage, but also getting their nice hooks in,
right.
And that's a big part of this funding round too.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, the one thing that I didn't mention at the open here was they kind of announced their revenue numbers and split between direct to consumer and business to business, right? So the information had this. So it was $1 billion of ARR for B2B, right? Versus 3.4 million. This is as of March, right? So it was about 29% of their revenue was B2B, and the rest was kind of direct to consumer. So that, to me, I feel like B2B is going to be 80% of their revenue,
right?
Like that, maybe more, right down the road. And we've already all talked about it, how we just think that's just starting to happen, right? Where businesses are starting to implement AI in kind of a proper way.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it. And we were harping on that a week or two ago, right? Like the B2B is the main number that I want to watch. But maybe they're doing something really, really clever here, a little bit different than maybe what Apple did when we were all kids, pushing Macs into the classroom and things like that. But you get the B2C user base, get them really, really comfortable with it. And eventually we want to bring that into the business. Guess what? What are you most comfortable with? It's this technology. And then it becomes the B2B. And then we know that we can really crank up the price on the B2B side because of the inelasticity, right? So yeah, I think that's, who cares if it's 29 today? It will go more towards that 80 down the road.
Okay, great. So Evan, these guys are like, if you think about like these guys are masters of the universe type people, right? So like Sam Altman's, like a kingmaker in Silicon Valley, and then he's got unlimited capital. I mean, the people that are investing in this thing have unlimited amounts of money, right? So who knows what other businesses they could get into, you know what I mean? Or even really what's coming down the pipe for AI. I mean, God only knows, right? What this stuff could look like. I mean, would you go back to like 2004, 5 and say Google would be a cloud business, have a huge cloud business? I wouldn't have said that. Right? I mean, cloud didn't even really exist. You know what I'm saying? So like, what do you think? Is that potential too that maybe OpenAI starts to move out into other kind of business areas, maybe associated with AI or downstream, upstream from AI?
I think that needs to happen. I mean, if you look at all of the multi-trillion dollar technology companies, they all have multiple business lines that are humming. And actually, what you really see is all of them have one or two business lines which have an insane margin. Where you're like, wait a second,
Mm-hmm.
this like Google with search or Amazon with AWS, where there's this one business that's just a cash juggernaut, makes a ton of
Fair.
money, highly profitable, and they can use those profits to invest in the other bets of the business, which allow that valuation to compound and grow. Now,
Right.
OpenAI doesn't have that cash juggernaut in the same
Yeah.
way that like a Google and Amazon does, but it could, especially when you look at like the unlock of Apple and Apple Intelligence. And I can imagine there's some sort of revenue share where they unlock a premium feature because Apple's really looking to harness their services business. So you imagine like
Right.
a Siri Plus or a premium tier here where OpenAI is getting a cut of that revenue, and you're talking, billions of users around the world with iPhones or whatever. It's a huge unlock. It's not there today.
Yep.
A question I have for you, actually, since you asked the question about whether they'll reach $1 trillion valuation, what
Yeah.
revenue number do you think they need to hit to have that valuation?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, like, look, I would say 50 billion feels right. I mean, that's 20
20x.
times.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think if you have a 20, look, the timing matters too, right? So if they go from 5 billion, where I think they're going to be at the end of this year, to a 50 billion in like, let's say 7 years time, that's a lot of revenue in a short period. I think in a relatively short period of time, that warrants like a 20 times revenue multiple. If we're looking like 15 years from now and they're at a 20, they're at 50 billion. I don't know. Maybe like that's maybe not as interesting. Still attractive, but not as interesting. So I think how quick they get there. I do think 20 is the right number,
Okay.
right? But I do think how quick they get there to the 50 they'll need to get there relatively quickly to
Well, just
maintain and kind of that 20x.
well, to
Yeah.
use a comparison with like the traditional $1 trillion technology companies, they trade at like between 20 and 30 earnings, not revenue, earnings.
Right.
So I feel
Right.
like at 50 billion revenue for OpenAI, what is the earnings? What's the margin on that where they're
Yeah, but
really getting to the valuation of trillion?
Yeah.
yeah, Evan, if you're doing that though, how long did it take Microsoft to get there? A whole lot longer than it could take OpenAI. So that's where the growth
That's the
component
speed,
comes in
man.
with Aaron's number, right? So
You got to do it fast. Like, look, I will offer this too. I do think that there's a place where if OpenAI can convince, C-suites that they can eliminate people and replace them with AI, right? That they can charge a lot more money than what they're charging today. Because that's immense value. So there could be an argument for like increasing the price of their solutions to, because if you're paying a person $100,000 a year plus benefits and everything else, you're into them for like 115, 120, and you can come in and replace them with an AI for 25,000 a year. I mean, you're probably doing that, right? That's a good investment. So, I mean, if you like Klarna is talking about taking down more than 50% of their staff, 60% of their staff, right? So like if someone came to you as a CEO with that trade-off, say like, look, how much is your staffing cost? What's this? All right, reduce that number by 60% and I'll take half. You're like, yeah,
yeah, and if that
that's
becomes your
good to
core,
me. Let's do it.
your
You know
core,
what I mean?
your core business, I mean that really compounds elsewhere too, because then you don't need as many people for HR. You're not getting as many HR style violations either.
Yeah.
Then your finance team might not need to be quite as large either because it's more simplified, and then
Or you
it
don't
just goes and
have a
goes to all
finance team.
those. Yeah.
It's
I
like
was gonna
stuff
say.
like that. Like, but you're not wrong, Nick. I mean, this is the guy. I mean, maybe this sounds a little silly, and I'm probably oversimplifying it, but I do think that these are some of the decision points that companies, C-suites, will be having. Right? Is that, and then all of a sudden, when everyone realizes how valuable these things are, it could get really interesting. But like you say, Evan, there's these open source models too, so that's going to, I think, ultimately impact pricing pressure on what people can really charge for this stuff. So it'd be interesting to see how it plays out.
So Nick, let me ask you this. Since it sounds like you're sort of bullish on the $1 trillion opportunity, if OpenAI is worth $1 trillion, how much is Nvidia worth? And I'll give you the numbers today. Nvidia is worth 2.8 trillion today, and OpenAI is looking to raise it at 150 billion. So if you're talking let's say a 5x, or let's call OpenAI 2, it's a 5x jump on OpenAI. Where's Nvidia? Making them do the math.
I actually think you're going to have, let's say that it goes from 5 to 4 to 3. I don't have huge I don't see a massive upside in the long term for Nvidia, to be fair, because I think they're really taking advantage of the shortage of chips and what everybody demands immediately. And I also think the efficiency of the models will probably get better over time, and we'll be smarter about using them. So yeah, I would say that goes from, if it's at a 5, then a 5, a 4, a 3. Let's say
I tell you, I had
the next 5 years, and then the next 5 years after that, something along those lines. I mean, that's still freaking brilliant, right? For Nvidia, it's still like a brilliant case, but it's just not going to be as big of a difference.
I had a advisor client of mine send me a video of Grok's CEO doing an interview. Grok's a chip company, right? They're focused on inference, so they kind of compete with Nvidia. And he had some really interesting things talking about capacity. So effectively, Nvidia is like at capacity on how much chips they can make, and they've already sold those out into the marketplace, right? So like the amount of compute, the total amount of compute globally is like set. So I mean, that's where, Evan, like I think I wouldn't be surprised if OpenAI starts making their own chips, right?
I mean, Meta is, right?
But Meta is, Google is,
but
right?
Does that all weighs on the valuation of OpenAI? Because that's all capex, that's all expenditures.
Well, unless
hurts the margin, which makes the business less profitable.
But if we're flooding the market with more and more folks that are making chips, more and more are tied at the hip with OpenAI, they get their allocations. I mean, we probably all saw the Larry Ellison speech that was like flooding Twitter. He was just like, we went out to lunch, and we were like, take my money, just take it, and then I guess he and Elon got their allocation, but it's still like, if supply equals demand, if there's way more supply and we're not hell bent on it being an Nvidia chip, and it could be Zuckerberg's chip or whomever else's. I mean,
right.
That is to the benefit of OpenAI, Anthropic, et cetera, right? So,
well, they'll be selling it. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like if they have this and they kind of crack the code on compute and developing chips, like these guys at Grok have something special. I mean, they basically like have re-engineered how to make chips specifically for inference, right? That's like running AI models, and they're using like older technology. It's like really interesting and smart. So they're kind of sidestepping Nvidia and the supply chain and a lot of different. There's a lot of innovation in what they're doing. So, OpenAI starts to hit this wall on compute, and they're like, all right, we got to figure this out, and they all of a sudden innovate and find some new solution, and then that unlocks capacity to compute, and they're able to sell that to third parties too. That's like kind of a hyperscaler type situation, right? So that's what I'm saying. Like I think it's interesting to think about what new businesses are going to come out of this play. It's not going to just be what we see today at OpenAI, right? They're going to have other kind of businesses that will evolve and they'll move into, just like I think all these big tech companies have.
Yeah, I guess I just find it very interesting that in one business, in one segment, there's the AI large language model businesses where you're perfectly comfortable saying OpenAI is going to 5x, 6x, 7x, whatever, get to $1 trillion valuation, knowing that there's incredibly comparable competitors in the market in probably a business that's probably going to crunch on margin. And then another
Yep.
business where we're sitting here where there's like chips and silicon, and where we have a clear market leader in Nvidia, which has like the IP and has been around for a long time. And you're like, oh, well, their valuation can't grow as quickly because there's all these competitors like Rock there and come and eat their lunch or take market share. And I guess it's
Sure.
like, I find it very, I find those two ideas, I mean, you can have two ideas in your head, of course, but I find it like somewhat contradicting, because you're like, well, on one hand, there's a world where there's clear market, like these guys are just going to eat everyone else's lunch. On this one, where someone's already eaten lunch, like that, it's never going to happen.
Well,
Or it's going to drop in
wouldn't
value.
you compare it to, I mean, pop Nvidia into somewhat closer to a commodity, because you have other chip manufacturers with them directly in their sites, and then maybe put OpenAI much more aligned to the search business of Google. Yahoo has the same thing, Bing or whomever. Pick your Ask
Well,
Jeeves.
I think, but like OpenAI is closer to Anthropic and the LLM business, where there's clearly open source models like Llama.
But Yahoo and Google, I mean, they search the results are pretty similar, but then once Google took that step and got further and further ahead,
That's a fair point.
That's the tough part that everybody else is going to have to crack. And to Aaron's point about how easily OpenAI has been able to raise the valuation and raise capital, probably also get a revolving line of credit here. Who's the CEO of Anthropic? Is he or she going to be able to do that? I don't know their name right now. Right? I think that's a key differentiator. Their ability to tap that infinite supply of money in this space, that's going to really be an outsized difference for them.
Well, listen, this is why I love investing, because this is what makes a market, right?
Totally.
Like, people have different opinions on this stuff.
Evan can buy my Nvidia, and
yeah, man, it's like this is what it's all about, right? So hence the question on if they can get to $1 trillion or not.
Hey, listen, it's no Microsoft. I was like, done. I'm like, I played with whatever O1, their new model last week, and then this week, and I saw it drop this morning. I was like, hey, Microsoft app portfolio, like, I'm just getting the indirect exposure. What they own a ton of OpenAI. Just
it's true.
Just betting on the stream without having to find the private deal.
It's true. Okay, let's hit on United Airlines did a deal with Starlink. Okay, so here's my question for you guys. So Starlink, for those that don't know, is SpaceX's satellite internet solution, right? So you can pop up a little Starlink dish, which is not relatively expensive, in my opinion, and you get like perfect 5G internet. It's like incredible, right? It's like magic. So they're putting these on planes now. Hawaiian Airlines has done it, Qatar Airlines has done it, and now United Airlines is going to do it, right? So here's my question for you guys. Does the type or the quality of the internet on Wi-Fi on an airline actually determine whether you fly on that airline or not?
I'm not flying
right?
United.
Nick, what do you think?
United.
Like, what's it again?
I'm not flying United because it's United. But I would say this.
Why is that though? Hold on. Why is that? I just flew United like 2 weeks ago. Like, why? What's wrong with United? Why don't you like the United?
No, I've just been delayed on it and just haven't had.
Okay.
It's no
service.
It's like no frills. I mean, there's not a whole lot to it.
Service.
Yeah.
So what? You Delta guy?
No. Well, now I've had some pretty bad experiences on pretty much every airline.
Yeah,
so
right.
Next long haul is Virgin Atlantic.
Ooh.
I do still like them. They're fine in my book. But
okay.
I've been not really anything but souring on American different airlines. Delta.
What about Evan? What do you think? You pick an airline based on stuff like Wi-Fi quality or anything like that? How do you pick it?
So I haven't done it to date because I haven't found that any of the Wi-Fi solutions are really that reliable. So, but if you had, for me, the decision of where to fly or what airline to fly primarily is like which airport, because we live in New York.
Right.
It's like, do I want to deal with that in JFK, or am I flying during rush hour? Do I want to get to Newark, or can I fly to LaGuardia?
Yikes!
It all depends on
Newark.
that ultimately the airport determines the airlines in New York City, because if you're flying on one versus the other, like they kind of have their allegiances. But if you told me that one airline had far superior Wi-Fi and I was flying on a business trip and I knew I needed to get work done, it would certainly be a determining factor for me. to date, I haven't really found any of like I basically at this point when I fly, like I don't expect to do any real work on an airplane because like the Wi-Fi is so hit or miss. Like maybe get a
Right.
crush a couple emails, but like I'm never really banking on it. But if you told me one did, like it was like really stellar, and you were going to get 100 megabits consistently with no lag, and you could take whatever video calls or
Okay,
whatever
how
you need
about
to,
this?
done. Like I'm
Okay,
in.
that's kind of where I was thinking about it, right? Like, usually you get on this stuff and they're like no video calls, no phone calls on the plane, right? Because I think because the Wi-Fi is so bad on planes that if you did that, everybody else would get like super slow, and then if enough people did
You
it,
have
it would be
enough,
done.
like you see that people get dragged off the United Airlines flights just because it's United. But imagine you're chit chatting, and then the person next to you is chirping, and then the person that's one seat across,
Nah,
they're
man,
would
getting
annoy me
pissed
too.
off,
I'd agree.
right?
you pop in the noise canceling earbuds, bud, and you're done. You're good to go.
So our guests missed the opportunity to observe the cold open today, but we were talking about the fisticuffs going
Fist
down
fight.
at Balthazar. But that's not going to fly. No pun intended. No way.
No, well,
Like you want to stream Netflix, fine, but download it before you get on the plane. Who cares?
So
This
look,
isn't make or
I
break.
would. This opens up. I think this opens up a whole. So on the Excella they do like the quiet car, right?
Yeah.
So you want to be in the quiet part of the plane, you go sit in these rows or whatever, right?
it doesn't
and then,
really
like
work on an airplane, though. I would say that doesn't work on an airplane, but I will say that you can call into a call, like a conference call or something like that, and listen. Like that you cannot do today because the Wi-Fi is not good enough or strong enough. And for me, a lot of my meetings and calls are sort of like check-ins or hearing like just broader, like whatever conferences or that sort of thing, and that I would appreciate.
I got to tell you guys, I think if they let people talk on the phone, right? Like take phone calls, I think people would take United. They would like pay more, or they would change their schedule around because they could, like, to your point of it, they could actually work. You know what I mean?
I mean, they
like,
did
they
used
could
to have
work like
phones
they were at
on
the desk.
airplanes. For what it's worth, they did used to have phones on airplanes.
Yeah, and they would charge you $20 a minute. Like something.
I remember those with the credit. You pop them out and then you do the credit card. I remember that.
But from a cultural perspective, I think I align with Nick, where there's no quiet car like functionality on an airplane unless they created that with like a real wall. I don't want to be I don't want to be in a subway car or anywhere where someone's taking, like, I don't want to hear anyone else's calls. Like I got even my noise canceling headphones.
Come on. Hold on, you guys. I'm calling you out. People, all this whole like open, like floor plan desk thing. Everyone's been working at home too long. I remember being on like the floor at Morgan Stanley, like people yelling at each other, and it's
Aaron,
it's like mayhem.
Half the people on the plane just suck down 4 melatonin trying to fall asleep, and you're yapping on your phone. Here we'll go back to the violence. I got headbutt on the New York subway because I had my BlackBerry out one day too close to somebody else and didn't realize. The guy just smashed me. I'm like, no, nobody wants this in the air. Nobody wants it.
Also, so, you didn't pay $800 to get on. Yeah, I agree.
So that could backfire. Then. So then if you did like a Wi-Fi, Starlink Wi-Fi on the United flight, and you're like, hey, you can take phone calls. And like some people are like, I'm not flying United because I don't want to be in there with all these people on the phone.
Totally.
Right?
That's me. Right?
Yeah. Interesting.
I'll take JetBlue.
But let's bundle this back into our last conversation, though. You got great Wi-Fi. You can run AI models. You could be like, okay, like using ChatGPT or like that. Again, productivity. Like you're talking about. I mean, I use these things all the time. So, and they do not work really well on Wi-Fi. I've already tried many times. So, like, just another reason, like having good Wi-Fi is a very consistently good, reliable Wi-Fi where you can do things like you are at home. Sans video calls and phone calls, still a big differentiator for me on a business flight, not on a personal flight. I don't care at all.
Fair point. Well, I don't know if it would, like, I'm more of a price guy because I'm a total value freak, right? So I'm more of a price guy, and the time, like what time the flight leaves versus what kind of perks they'd have. I mean, don't get me wrong. I get super salty if they have the direct TV option on the flight, which is like the worst. You know what I mean? But anyway, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I have to imagine this is like a pretty nice revenue deal for Starlink, right? You know what I mean? So they didn't disclose the terms of the deal, but
I would hope they offer it for free. I think Wi-Fi should be. It's free. It's free.
They are offering it for free. Yeah,
it's your goddamn right, Evan.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's like if they do, I don't know. There's a lot you could do with this now. Okay, there's a lot you could do with this now. Now that you got this, and it's like in your living room, but you're on the plane. You know what I mean? So it'd be interesting to see what kind of solutions they give. But yeah, they say it's going to be free. They're trying to get more business travelers.
But
So
I think
SpaceX, $1 trillion business.
yeah, don't get me started on that one.
Absolutely. Well,
I love
think
that company.
that's the race. Who's going to arrive there first?
Yeah.
But this is also a branding exercise. That's
for sure.
Every time you're up there, you're exposing your brand to someone new that's not familiar with Starlink or doesn't realize, oh, I'm over the ocean or over wherever.
That's a good point.
And
that's very smart. I hadn't thought about that.
Internet. So
yeah, that's very smart.
And
that's a
Aaron,
good point.
You sent around that Delta uses Viasat.
Right.
They're down 43% in the last year.
Yeah.
And then you said American Airlines is on Intelsat, and that's private. So I don't know where that is, but
yeah. But I'm not long either of those companies.
I mean, Elon could come and just eat their lunch, right?
For sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I don't know a lot about satellite internet, but my understanding is those two are stationary satellites, so they're not global. It's just like US only. You know what I mean? So I mean, Starlink's global,
right?
So like, it's one thing. I mean, obviously we're all US guys, right? So we're thinking about what it's like in the United States, but Delta flies globally, United Airlines flies globally, or American flies globally, and then there's of course international carriers as well. So any of those guys want a solution, that might be the only game in town is to use Starlink, right? So it'd be kind of cool to see how this all plays out.
I mean,
but
United Airlines is only worth $16 billion. They may as well just buy the whole airline.
just buy that whole thing, man. Who wants to own an airline though? Yeah, hard no. So okay, last topic. eToro. We haven't talked about crypto in a long time. Like a long time, fellas. So eToro got slapped around by the SEC this past week. They got fined not much money, $1.5 million. It's like a drop in the bucket, but I think it's more branding than anything. But they basically said they can only trade Bitcoin and Ethereum,
Bitcoin
right?
Cash.
And all the other coins have to stop, and Bitcoin Cash, and all the other coins have to go away. So, I mean, eToro was like a big crypto player. Right. At least that's how they were positioning themselves, is to be big in crypto. But like, here's the question. Since we haven't talked about crypto in a while. So you got Coinbase out there, right? But now you have these ETFs out there too. Okay. Like if you're a traditional finance person, broker dealer, registered investment advisor, are you buying coins direct? Or are you just going to buy the ETFs? Like Evan, what do you think? Like you just buying the ETFs, or you're going to try and figure out how to like custody these coins? Which ones are securities? Which ones are not securities? Like what do you think about this?
It really depends on the advisor and the strategy that they're looking to offer. I would imagine the majority of advisors who want to give their clients a small sliver of exposure to crypto will probably just use the ETFs or even the closed-end funds that are offered by Grayscale, which give you like a little bit broader exposure with some of the other altcoins.
Right.
Versus there isn't even from my understanding, there is no SEC publicly approved crypto custodian that is a qualified custodian that an RIA can officially use. There are some ones that have said that they are qualified custodians, and there hasn't been clarity from the regulators, and they're just going that way anyways. But I would imagine that with the ETFs, the majority of advisors are going that route. But that doesn't mean it's all advisors, and I don't necessarily think that's the best option.
Yeah,
personally.
I got you. Nick, what do you think? You think folks just buy the ETFs, or they start going direct? Some of these more traditional people.
Yeah, just objectively, if I'm looking at something like a Grayscale, the fees on it are pretty hefty. I mean,
they are.
So
they are high.
In that case, and also going back to Evan's point on the custody, I mean, Coinbase has a brilliant custody business. They're ahead of the game. They have great lawyers. They understand how everything's meant to function. So yeah, I would actually feel more confident just opening up a Coinbase wallet and investing directly in Ethereum or Bitcoin or whatever it might be. So I would go that
versus
way,
the ETF.
versus the ETF. Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, but I just, if I'm getting effectively the same thing and I'm not going to get hosed on the actual
the
trade
fee
itself, then why would I pay,
right,
whether it's 35, 50, or a percent, basis points,
fair
or
point.
percent more?
But it's the risk, right? Because Coinbase does have an institutional custody business called Coinbase Prime. Gemini has one as well. They're operating under the state trust depository rule to become a qualified custodian. And the SEC has explicitly said that it does not believe that those are qualified custodians by the rules. So if you are an RIA and you are taking client dollars and you're putting them into Coinbase Prime and you're holding those assets, you are taking some marginal risk. Now, Coinbase is going to say,
Right.
you're basically taking the risk that if the SEC comes after you and says that, hey, you're holding assets for your client in a non-qualified custodial way, you're betting that Coinbase is going to foot the bill on the legal side to fight for you. And I think that's a pretty good bet for what it's worth. Coinbase has basically come out and said that they will continue to fight the good fight for anyone who wants crypto and regulatory clarity in the United States for institutional crypto. But it is not without risk. And you as an advisor still hold that risk individually. And there's just like, advisors take that stuff seriously, and you have to wonder. Remember, if you're an RIA, especially if you're a traditional RIA and you're managing someone's portfolio of mostly stocks and bonds and ETFs, and like this is like what, less than 1% of someone's portfolio, how much risk do you want to take on your entire career in business for someone's tiny little
pain
versus 20 basis points in a Bitcoin ETF?
So are we not still removed from that because of the ETF? I mean, is going to hold these assets, and that has to be custodied somewhere else as well. So now you're just trusting that whichever custodian the ETF uses, right? And then you're still paying.
Well, to be clear,
you're not wrong.
The SEC has said that Bitcoin and Ethereum are not securities.
Right.
They have given that guidance, and therefore those assets do not need to be held in qualified custody effectively. Now, within an ETF, they do need to be, and therefore Coinbase custody and Gemini have had that. And so that's sort of like my understanding of like the gray area that the regulators have gotten comfortable with, which is why those ETFs have somewhat been approved for futures and now for spot. That does not necessarily apply to all the other crypto assets, which Coinbase does custody and Gemini do custody as their qualified custodian. They do follow the exact same rules that a trust company is required to, holding those deposits one-to-one, not lending against them, holding them with security. I mean, in my opinion, my personal opinion, taking off my regulatory hat, I think that they should be considered qualified custodians. And Anchorage has an OCC license. They should also be considered a qualified custodian. And there's someone trying to get a bank charter in Wyoming. They should have been approved for a bank charter. But the regulators have continued to stop them every step of the way and continue to deny whether or not they consider them a legal custodian in the eyes of the qualified custody. So it is still a gray area.
Right. So bringing it back to eToro, but also like maintaining on this area. So let's say, just to make it easy, you pay a 1% management fee, just to make the math nice. I mean, it's, in my mind, less than 1%. You might have any sort of event like eToro says, hey, you got 180 days to move. If you're in the US, you have anything but Ether or Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash, you got to shove off. Okay, so then it dips down and you buy in somewhere else. You buy another exchange. But if I'm every year paying my 1%, and I could circumvent that and just buy the hard asset, I think I'm still leaning on the asset side. And maybe not as an RIA. You bring up some really good points, right?
Yeah. Also, the qualified custodians do charge you a custody fee. It's not free. Like, you do have to pay them 20 to 50 basis points.
But that's well less. Yeah, well less than what it would be investing in an ETF, though, right?
Listen,
maybe not well less. Depends on.
I think all this crypto stuff is super expensive because I have a Coinbase account, right, Nick? Yep. So, and not because I chose.
No, we were all like, a couple years ago. We were all really interested and have to understand it. So you open up an account, you fund it, and
that's what I did. I remember I was at a bar with this financial advisor, and he was telling me about his like cousin or something that went down to some South American country, and like everybody was putting their money into Bitcoin. I'm like, oh my gosh, like whole countries are using this. Like, I'm in. Like, I'm gonna buy some. So the only place at that time to get it was to open up like a Coinbase account, right? So that's what I did, because that seemed like, to Evan's point, that seemed like the safest place to go if you were going to do it. That was like the safest place to do it at, right? So that's what I did. But I would say this, to me, this looks and smells, having been a product guy at Morgan Stanley and TD Ameritrade, like literally would have been in the room deciding what, if we were going to do this or not, right? I would say we would not do it. Right. And I would say this looks like gold. To me, this looks like gold. So there's IAU and oh my gosh, I can't remember the tickers for gold ETFs. IAU's iShares, and then there's
GLD.
AUU or something like that. I think is the spider one. But so there's two gold ETFs. So like, if you want to buy gold, you buy the ETF. You don't even think about like, I'm going to buy gold bars and like hold them in custody at some vault somewhere for my client. You know what I mean? Like there's so much administrative pain. That's the key thing, with at least with what I see in traditional finance, like broker dealers and investment advisors. Like if there's too much administrative pain, it's like, ooh, that's like it's too hard, And I think to Evan's point, if you're only going to have a very small allocation in the portfolio, then why am I doing that? Like I can just go and buy that thing, and maybe even to your point, Nick, even if it is more expensive, even if it's twice as expensive, it's so much less administrative pain. You know what I mean? And all I have to do is just type a ticker into order entry and I'm done. And if I want to sell it, I can sell it intraday. Like there's like liquidity. It's easy. It's simple. My compliance department won't give me fits about it. Like simple, right? Versus the opposite, which is like super complex. I think it's worth it. You know what I mean? So unless that fee, the incremental fee, which I will say this, because the other thing, Nick, is I looked at the spreads that the like Coinbase charges. They rip your face off
really?
on the trade.
Yeah, that's the other thing. It's like almost 1%. Like you can get like
I've seen it even higher than that, Evan.
Yeah,
like I've seen it like multiple percent, depending on what's going on, right? You know what I'm saying?
And they're not a broker dealer, so therefore they don't have a best execution or a fiduciary responsibility. So like you might get your I've like the math actually, when you think about the ETFs, and I've spent some time thinking about this because I think that the best place to hold crypto is in your retirement account, because it's especially a Roth account, because it obviously has like all the upside and none of the tax opportunity. But at the same time,
it's taxed like income too.
Not
like
if
you throw it in the Roth.
Yeah. Gain. And a Roth.
Yeah.
But the thing is that the Roth, you really have to buy it either in like a self-directed account, or you could buy it as the ETF. And you're like, well, I could pay 1% fee to buy Bitcoin in my self-directed IRA today, or I could buy the ETF today and pay 20 basis points a year. But if you're going to retire in 20 years, 20 basis points over 20 years is pretty expensive versus like a 1% buy today. So like it really does, your how long you're planning to hold the asset for also really does play into your strategy there. Because if you're an RIA and you're like, I'm going to hold it for 3 years, 4 years of my time on, like, it doesn't really make sense to buy it directly, because you're going to pay almost the same to transact it.
So here's my crystal ball on this. Okay. I think, being an old ETF guy, right? Like I think ETF companies will just keep bringing out different coins. Okay. So they'll bring out, I don't know, whatever's next, Solana. They'll just keep bringing them, and the SEC will like approve them. And as long as nothing blows up, they'll just keep approving these new coins. And then it will all be like super institutional and super controlled, because it will be all the normal suspects, usual suspects. So the SEC will be comfortable with that and feel like they have their arms around it, right? And then they'll start doing fund to funds where you can get multiple coins in one basket and all that stuff, right? So that's how I see this going. And I see crypto getting really big. And I'm not talking about like technology applications. I'm just talking about pure investment opportunities, right? I see like a lot of capital going into the space for the sole purpose of it will be administratively simple now to get exposure to it for huge piles of assets, right?
For
that are
asset allocation, and then also the transfer of wealth between the baby boomers and everyone else below.
Yeah, I mean, there's like I don't know how much total, I should know this, but like, in the wealth management space, there's like 40-50 trillion dollars in the United States alone, right? So like now all of a sudden you've opened that up. Solana can now access $50 trillion like in an order entry ticket. It's simple, right? So like, I just think you'll start to see, that's my crystal ball and my experience. I don't see like Morgan Stanley deciding to start custodying cryptocurrency, like directly. And I don't know. Unless I could see them maybe doing if they're institutional side of their business, like pensions, endowments, foundations, hedge funds, stuff like that, right? Because they could charge margin or whatever, like, and just make a ton of money. But I don't think they'll ever do it for like Mr. and Mrs. Smith wealth management client, right? I think they'll stay away from that. That's my gut, at least my gut kind of take on it. But I don't know, man. We haven't talked about crypto in forever, guys. It's like off the radar.
It's not off the radar in my world.
Not off the radar in your world? Okay.
I'm thinking about it a lot. I think it's a good opportunity. And I have a totally different view on the future than you do, but it's beside the point.
You do? Oh, well, maybe next. Let's talk next time. Let's talk about your view, because who cares what I think. And then for the eToro,
I mean, like you were saying, Aaron, it's $1.5 million to settle, neither admitting or denying guilt.
Yeah.
Is this beneficial though? Because you kind of want to see an eToro fight, but if you're only getting fined 1.5 million, why would you fight? I think you're getting 1.5 million because you didn't fight, Nick. That's what I would. But it's going to cost them at least 1.5 million if they were to put up a fight, and then it's not
for sure
not a sure thing. So
but Nick, not to interrupt, if you put up a fight with the SEC on something like this, they fine you like 250 million or something crazy. You know what I mean? But if you come in and they're like, you shouldn't have done this, and you're like, I'm sorry, you're right, I shouldn't have done this. Like, let me fix it. And they'll be like, okay, like they're going to do the right thing and fix it. Well, 1.5 million fine.
They didn't say, okay, we shouldn't have done this. They just backed away, and that's why they have just those three currencies, right? But I'm hopeful that this doesn't set a bad precedent, because we all see a bright future within cryptocurrencies and anything related to digital assets, right? So that's the hope. You kind of want someone else to come in and fight, and maybe that's going to be Robinhood or one of the others that is being like dragged through some SEC.
But I don't. This is the thing, Nick. I don't know if the demand's there with like these traditional pools of money. I don't know if the demand. That's what I guess maybe the genesis of my question is like, is the product teams at Fidelity and JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley and Merrill Lynch and UBS, are they like pulling their hair out trying to find ways to custody crypto assets? Like, right. I don't think they are, man. Like, now that we got these ETFs, I think that's like relieved pressure. For
the market at large, the ETFs are the best option. Right.
Yeah, I think that's kind of where I'm at with it. Like, you're going to have some people who are like super into this, and then but look, we'll see what happens with the technology. It's interesting. The reason maybe we talk more about this next time too, because it's like, where's crypto going? Because I still believe in the technology, but I haven't seen like a ton. Well, I guess I have started to see a lot of people implement it, right? But I haven't seen that being able to like, you've been able to monetize that through coins. You know what I mean? Where you could like make investments that would warrant a UBS product team to say, hey, we got to have custody of this stuff because there's all these coins out there now that our clients want to buy. Like, I'm not seeing that kind of stuff happen. But what do you think? Next time? Let's talk about that next time.
Just around eToro, just to close the gap here or close the book on it, they're really not a huge US player. Like, they're a global exchange. Like, I think that for them,
Israel,
it's not worth the fight here. They're offered they're in every other jurisdiction around the world. I think that this is like, they're probably just like, it's not worth the fight.
Yeah, they're up a lot. eToro, I have eToro up 107% from March of 2023, their last round. Right. So they were going to do a SPAC. Remember that eToro? They were going to do a SPAC and then like backed away from it. Yeah. But you're not wrong, man. Those guys are out of Israel. I've actually met some of the guys on their executive team. They're like really nice guys, smart, right? And a big business in Europe,
Yeah.
But I hope they listen.
Tiny for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I wish those guys the best. I don't think, to your point, I don't think this was like a big part of their total revenue at eToro. So I don't think it like impacts their business that much. Maybe their business plans, right, for the US is a little bit different. Will have to be a little bit different now, but yeah. I wish those guys the best,
Yeah. Okay, we can close up there. I got more to talk about, but we don't have to talk about that.
All right, cool. That sounds good. All right, fellas, was that 3 good topics today?
Oh yeah.
I'm not buying, if we ever buy Nick a plane ticket, I'm not buying it on United. I know that now. So
you're buying it on Starlink Airlines.
Yeah. And if Nick ever
Starlink Airlines,
I'm staying far away.
That's right. I like that. All right, fellas.
Good-
I
good
appreciate you
stuff.
guys. Thanks for this today.
Later.
Thanks, man. Have a good
All
one.
right.